All right, folks. Welcome, everybody, to Irish Sports Daily Power Hour. And I wanted to say welcome to our viewers as well on our maiden voyage here for YouTube's. We're hosting Power Hour live on YouTube. So from now on, if you want to kind of join the show, we're going to be doing it right after the Marcus Freeman press conference, or we'll give you an exact time after the season as well, as far as when we'll be on and that type of thing. And so just kind of wanted to let everybody know in the future, if you want to check the show out live, Jamie and I will be on YouTube live. You can search for our channel on YouTube and search for Irish Sports Daily, and you'll be able to find us live there. Also, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel and that type of thing. So we're excited about that, and we just decided to do it this way because we can also take the audio afterwards and upload it as a podcast like we always have done. So we just thought this would be something a little bit extra and beneficial. And to be honest, I got a whole lot of messages from girls saying they wanted to see the Yama. They wanted to see how handsome the Yama was. And the smiling face after yet another Pittsburgh Steelers win. And a big win for the Yama. So I knew the Yama would be in a pretty good mood today. Are you excited?
I mean, I am in a pretty good mood. Great win. Always good to beat Greg's Ravens. Greg, longtime.
I was not going to mention that.
Yeah,
I was not going to mention that. And by the way,
listen, I'm gonna mute the thing. All right, we're not doing that. We're look. Listen. They didn't score an offensive touchdown. All right, a huge asterisk next to it. No offensive touchdowns. Many people are saying the Penn State of the NFL. So that's just where it is. Can't score an offensive touchdown.
Where was that top-ranked offense from Baltimore in that game? Didn't see him.
Listen,
didn't he show up?
Lifelong Ravens fan since 2022. We're saving it for the playoffs when it matters. They were a great team. Regular season last year, bad. We're saving it for the playoffs. That's all I'm going to say. Please continue, boys.
All right. For everybody who doesn't know, that's of course Greg Wang, who does Irish Hit and Hustle, Irish Sports Daily's Hit and Hustle with Yama each week, and he's producing this show. He'll drop in with some comments now and again throughout the show as well. So be looking for him. Before we get going, I wanted to mention, first of all, it's a great time to sign up for Irish Sports Daily. Obviously, things are going really well for Notre Dame, and we're hoping that we're going to see a playoff run here. And if Notre Dame takes care of business here in the last two games, that's what we're going to see. So we're excited about that. So if you are not a member of Irish Sports Daily, go to the front page of Irish Sports Daily, click on the premium section, sign up. Also wanted to mention our sponsor, which is ESQ Clothing. Fall is here, and ESQ has you covered for all those weddings, cocktail events, and everything else. ESQ has been making the best handmade custom suits, sport coats, tuxedos, and shirts for the last decade. Has been featured on GQ, ESPN, USA Today, and you've seen them dressing your favorite players and coaches. ESQ only gets the best fabric from Italy and England's top mills. With over 40,000 fabrics to choose from, you're guaranteed to look your best. Go visit esqclothing.com and book your appointment. Mention ISD and get 10% off your entire purchase. Once again, that's esqclothing.com. All right, Yama, let's get into it, brother. So the game, it's kind of interesting when you think about it, and I think I don't want to make any excuses for the Irish because you know me, I'm not somebody who makes excuses about poor play or things like that, and I don't want to say that it was poor play throughout or be all negative about things, but when you kind of get rolling for a while and you beat a team like Louisville in a tough game, and then you hang 49 on Stanford, and you beat Georgia Tech in a tough game down there, hang 51 on Navy, 52 on Florida State. It's hard for any team to play well every single time out. It just is. And it's also what I would say unrealistic. And kind of in my commentary after the game, I mentioned, heck, just this week, when you look at Oregon, I mean, watch that game. Are you afraid to play Oregon with their offense? They just did not look very good. Defensively, they may look up pretty good, but let's be honest, Wisconsin just fired their offensive coordinator for a reason. So, you look at all the teams that lost. BYU lost and LSU lost, and a lot of these teams, it's just really hard, Yama, especially today, for teams to come out every single week and play well. So I think a lot of fans were excited about the way the offense was going, myself included. But this was not, I don't think, a very good performance. The reason I say that, I don't want everybody to hit the panic button at this point. There's really no reason to hit the panic button. When it mattered, they were able to do what they had to do to win the game. The game was never in question. There just was so many inexplicable things. The things we talked about the last 4 weeks of not turning the ball over and not doing stupid things with penalties and things like that. Not drop balls and all kinds of things that were happening. And sure enough, it's like every one of those things came in this game. And I think that had as much to do with the outcome as anything else. You know, you can say Riley Leonard was off, and I think he was at times. But you look at his stats, and he did some really nice things as well. I just think that for whatever reason, they just weren't quite together on this particular day, and it happens. And so no point in hitting the panic button at this point. But, and as we've seen in the past, Yama, when Marcus Freeman sees a problem, he goes and addresses it, and usually we see them fix that problem, and moving forward, they start playing better. So your thoughts here, Yama?
Yeah, I think rewatching the game, I mean, it really just came down to them, as Chris, who was in the chat, said, they shot themselves in the foot so many times. And really, like, you can really put it on the O-line for most of it.
Yeah.
Like, it was not a great game for the O-line, and maybe that was something where I thought that, congrats to them, obviously, for getting nominated or being a semifinalist for the Joe Moore Award, which was surprising, I think, for a lot of people. But maybe they were reading the headlines or something like that, and they just didn't play that well. I thought Virginia kind of took it to them a lot. Like, guys,
yes.
I don't think Virginia has a bad defensive line at all, but they won too many one-on-one matchups.
Yes.
And then obviously too, there were the penalties were huge in it, right? And you look at like all of those drives where they went 3 and out so many times in a row, it was always like something negative where they just got put behind the sticks. And Notre Dame just hasn't been good the entire year when they've been put behind the sticks. And like even just stuff like and really all those calls, other than maybe the Eli Raridan hold, which I thought, I don't know if that, like, that's just the one I see that you see that play all the time.
Oh, sure.
And that just doesn't get called all the time. But, obviously you're going to call hands to the face when a guy grabs a face mask, right? The Coogan one was a definite hold. I mean, Pat Coogan had a really rough start to the game. He gets like blown up on a pass rush early on in the game. Billy Shrout just gets like killed on this one play where that was the play where there was the 10-yard loss for Jeremiah Love, right? And maybe Jeremiah Love probably should have went down and made it a 3-yard loss or whatever, but he's just trying to make a play, right? Like he's trying to do something, turn something good out of it, which he's done numerous times this year, right? So I think there was just a lot of that kind of stuff. Obviously, you take like a 78-yard touchdown off the board. Jaden Harrison, that was a great throw by
it was a beautiful throw
by Riley Leonard.
Probably his best throw the entire year, I'd say.
Yeah, and Harrison absolutely cooked that guy. Obviously, Jaden Harrison had a great game. And it was just one of those things where they got put behind the sticks so many times, and they were just kind of really painted the picture of the game really like before that, and they just never found a rhythm because of that. And so I think that was like the main thing that kind of stuck out to me on offense. It obviously didn't matter because the defense just dominated for pretty much the entire game.
You mentioned the defense, and I mean, I just Jamie knows because I'm hypercritical during the games, and Greg knows I'm flying off text and I'm saying things. Didn't say one word about the defense the entire game, and that's been kind of a common practice recently. And I'm just stunned that they can just keep plugging guys in there, and the next guy comes in and he plays well. It's just really a rarity to see that. You may see that in the NFL because there's you have guys that are professionals and that you can just plug in there and they have a certain level of talent and ability, but you just don't see that very often in the game, in this college football. And so I'm just really surprised by what I've seen with this defense. And sometimes you bring a guy in, let's say a Leonard Moore, you bring a guy like that in. It's such a very critical and important position, because the way they play with their secondary really dictates how they're able to pressure. If you can't play a lot of kind of man coverage with single high safety, and you have to play a lot more zone, you're not going to be able to do a lot of the things that you need to do up front to create pressure. And to just have a true freshman just plug in there, and it's not one game, it's not a half, it's now multiple games where he's playing this well, and you're like, wow, same thing when you look at a Bryce Young and plug him in there, and all of a sudden he's playing really, really well. Or even a Donovan Heinisch, who we knew was a fighter and a guy who's going to play, give you some minutes, but nobody expected Donovan Heinisch to play the kind of minutes he played in this game. And yet they just absolutely dominated it. I know Virginia is not a great offense, but they have some playmakers. They have some ability, and they just totally shut this team down, and they had literally no chance at all. It is amazing to see. And I saw a stat that said, Notre Dame is the only team in the entire country who has held every single quarterback to one touchdown or less passing. That's amazing. That's remarkable. I mean, when you think about how many teams they played. Now, I'm not saying they're not playing, the Ravens or somebody like that. Somebody can throw the ball like crazy, but still, just one touchdown, and that's it. That's crazy to think how well they've been so consistent. And that, to me, that gives them a chance to be a real challenger when it comes into the playoffs. Because if you can consistently play as well as they do on defense, you're going to be in every game you play for sure. That doesn't mean you're going to win it, and we're going to get to the offense and that type of thing here in a second when it comes to the playoff. But the consistency that we've seen on defense is just remarkable. And I really think that's going to help them when they do get into the playoff. Your thoughts here?
Yeah, no, it has been remarkable. I do think Tyler Shook threw at least a couple touchdowns against Notre Dame. But I will say, and he's the best quarterback they faced all year. But if you look at his touchdowns and what he did in that game, those were basically perfect throws. Yeah. That's what it takes to kind of beat Notre Dame secondary. And that's, if you look at kind of the quarterback play across college football, and I know we'll talk a little bit more about some of these other teams and all that too, there's just not a lot of great quarterback play out there. There isn't a Trevor Lawrence, there isn't a Caleb Williams. There isn't one of those guys, those transcendent guys this year. And obviously, look what Notre Dame did to Caleb Williams last year. Obviously, this is a different defense, but in a lot of ways, obviously it's the same pieces, but it's to kind of, build off what you were saying too, right? Heinisch, obviously the way that he was able to rush the passer in this game. I thought Bryce Young and RJ Oben, this was by far, both of them, it was the best game that they played all year. And that's a really encouraging sign, because I think Oben has actually been playing a lot better in recent weeks, and he's kind of been a little bit snake bit. And obviously he's had a very frustrating year. Hasn't had the kind of year that anyone would have expected out of a guy who could have been he's not been JJB, right? He hasn't been Javonte Jean-Baptiste, that same kind of impact. But, if he can play up to this kind of level, the rest of the way, I mean, you'll take it. And Rod Hurd, obviously, had a big game in this game, huge, forced fumble. And outside of Xavier Watts, who obviously is an All-American again, he's probably going to be, he's a candidate for Defensive Player of the Year at the very least. He's a consistent playmaker through every game. But the thing that is most consistent about Notre Dame's defense throughout is that they have so many guys who can make plays each week. It doesn't they don't need to have someone that they rely on. It's not three guys that it's like, if these three guys don't play well, then no. It's different guys all the time making plays, and they just have so many of them. And obviously, a lot of them are very young, right? Or like, you obviously Leonard Moore again, right? Like you mentioned, right? Like, to have like Malachi Fields is a really, really good player. He's a very good player. Christian Gray obviously broke up that pass that he caught. So his numbers are a little bit skewed, but really the only thing that Fields got in the game was they had a formation where they got him matched up with Kaiser, and then that they won that matchup. They won on that slant, and he got a big play there. But outside of that, he didn't really have anything. They were like 1 for 3. He was 1 for 3 for 12 yards when targeted against Leonard Moore. And that's a thing where you're looking at a guy who's a senior, a guy who's probably going to go to the Senior Bowl, he's going to be an NFL player, one of the few guys on Virginia who's an NFL player. You're going against a true freshman. Like, that's something that you think that going into the week, if you're Virginia, hey, we should be able to win this matchup. And they did it. And that's just kind of what it is for Notre Dame's defense.
Yeah, no question about it. Now, we're going to get into, obviously, the games that are left and everything. But one thing that I mentioned kind of on the board today and kind of did some research on as well. And it's when you look at the I guess all the teams that are left that can be in this thing, in the playoff, there's just not a lot of great quarterbacks that are out there. Some guys who play really well at times, like a Carson Beck can play really well at times. Quinn Ewers can play really well at times. And so can Dylan Gabriel, but they're not always consistent. And, even a Jalen Milroe, who looks fantastic at times. But when you start looking at, Bama lost to Tennessee, and Jalen Milroe, threw for 239 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions in that game. When you look at Georgia and they lost to Ole Miss, Carson Beck only had 186 yards, 0 touchdowns, 1 interception. Texas lost to Georgia, and Quinn Ewers threw for 211 yards, but that was it. Also threw a pretty costly interception. Penn State lost to Ohio State. Drew Allar, 12 of 20, 146, 0 touchdowns, 1 interception. And I mean, even Jackson Dart, when they lost to Kentucky, probably one of his lowest passing games of 261 yards, only 1 passing touchdown. These big games, Yama, and this is the thing that I think a lot of Irish fans know and give them some anxiety at night, is that to win these big games, your quarterback's got to come up big. And I think Riley Leonard has done a really good job so far in a lot of these things. But when they saw the end of this, or, I shouldn't say this, the start of this game, when they saw, the way things were going and some of the throws that were made or missed, I should say, that's what gives you a little bit of anxiety. But my point being, they also, meaning the team that you're facing, their quarterback has to play well, and they haven't done that every time out either. And so as much as a lot of Irish fans get a little bit paranoid about it, you have to understand that these guys also have bad games where they don't necessarily play well. And I would say in this particular game, as you pointed out, it wasn't really Riley Leonard's fault in a lot of these situations. A lot of it was the offensive line screwing up, busted plays, penalties, just flat getting whipped too many times. And that's something we hadn't seen for really the last 4 or 5 games. So I think the quarterback is going to be huge when it comes down to this game, or I should say, you get to the playoffs, and it'll be important as well when you play USC and in this game this week. Riley Leonard's going to have to play well because, I think both of us think that Army is not quite what their ranking is, but they're still a pretty good defense. They still can move the ball. And so you're going to have to score points. And USC is a different team now with a different quarterback. And Lincoln Riley has finally decided, hey, I'm going to run the football. And when USC can run the football, they're a dangerous team. They're very dangerous. And they have one tremendous running back. So how far Notre Dame is going to go is that number 13 that you see on the screen. He's going to have to carry Notre Dame in these last couple games, and he's also going to have to put Notre Dame on his back when it gets to the playoff. If he plays well, Notre Dame has a chance to beat anybody, provided the offensive line plays better than they did in this game. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the line has to play better. And I really think, too, that when you look at this game and how they called it, and, he didn't scramble as much in this game as he has. And also, too, they only called 4 design runs with him the whole game. So that's obviously something like you don't want to, and they obviously didn't need to run those design run calls for Leonard in this game. So
you're being responsible at this point.
Absolutely. And like in this game against Army, where red zone is like, you got to get points. You got to get 6. You got to get 7, right? Like you got to score in the red zone. They've been a really, really great red zone defense, right? They're one of the top red zone defenses in the country this year. You have to, that is a point when you're going to have to do a lot of like Riley Leonard run game stuff. And then obviously too, like there's going to be so much riding on that USC game where guess what? Like if Riley Leonard's got to run it 20 times in that game, he's going to have to run it 20 times. So I think you have to kind of look at that game. This game too, I think is going to be really interesting with Army. One, I mean, we'll get into it in a second. They played nobody this year. Their schedule has been atrocious. But I think one thing that's really interesting about them is that they've like given up. They don't give up stuff deep in the passing game. They keep everything in front of them, right? And if Riley Leonard can be like how he was in like that Virginia Tech game, where they're like super accurate and Notre Dame can like get guys, make plays after the catch, that is going to be how they move the ball and have success against Army's defense, because they give up, they're one of the worst, in terms of completion percentage of what they give up. They give up 64.6% completions, which is 104th against FBS opponents this year. So they're just giving it up and then just keeping everything in front of them. They're very much a bend, don't break defense. And it's going to be important for, Leonard to be accurate, to work that stuff, which he has been really, really good in the short game stuff. And that is going to be crucial. And, that they get those things, they all of a sudden, and they just like, because there's going to take where they want you to drive it, right? They want you to drive it. They don't give up a lot of like big run plays either, right? They've been very, very good at like keeping that in front of them too. So they want you to drive it, and it's going to take guys like Jeremiah Love after the catch. Jane Greathouse, by the way, I know he got hurt in the beginning of this game, but on the run that he made, and he's been fantastic after the catch.
Yeah.
Harrison also very dangerous after the catch. Faison obviously problems hanging on, holding, catching the football
catching
right
the
now,
ball,
but been great after the catch. So those guys I think are going to be really important this week.
Yeah, there's a question in our questions about the rotation of wide receiver and if that should look different. We'll talk about that here in a minute. But you mentioned the Miami. You mentioned the Army team and the game this weekend. What stands out to you about this game? What do you think Notre Dame has to do to come out with a victory? And is there anything that kind of concerns you about this Army team coming into this game?
Yeah, I mean, it is very much like how everyone thought the Navy was, or how Navy was for years, and how people thought Navy was going to be this year, but it's not. Navy's offense isn't a hang on to the ball offense this year. That's not what they are. They're much more diverse and spread it out, and they'll throw it and all that too. Army is very much old school, triple option, right? And they're second in time of possession. They're dead last in pace of play. They're dead last. So they hold on to it. They milk the clock. They're trying to shorten the game. They're trying to shorten the game, right? And they want to keep as little possessions as possible because they think they can win like hey, we're going to win in the red zone, both areas. We're going to do that. And then we're going to win. They've been terrific at converting third and fourth downs. They're 16 of 19 on fourth down this year, right? So they just keep moving the chains, and they're very just positive runs. They first in havoc rate against, right? Like terrific at that. So it's going to be important they're going to get these things, and they're going to chug along and get first downs. But it's going to come down to Notre Dame, like making these negative plays, getting them behind the sticks, and forcing them out of their comfort zone. And if Notre Dame can also get up on them, if Notre Dame gets up 2 scores, the game is over. The game is over. Like, because they can't play to catch up. All Notre Dame has to do is just like literally just like play efficient the rest of the way. And they will
need
win
3
the game.
stops is what they need. You get 3 stops and you got a really good chance to win this game. And because I think Notre Dame will score on this team. And I just think if you can just shut them down on 3 possessions with nothing and then limit to maybe a field goal attempt on a couple others, you got a great shot to win this game. And here's the thing. I think that Navy, I think Army's personnel is a little better than Navy. I think Navy is much harder to defend, but I do think that Army, because they only do so much, they execute what they do better than Navy. Sometimes I think, what Navy tries to do, if you have enough time and you can execute all that, it's very difficult to stop. But I think because Army does limit what they do, that helps their execution on things. And as you mentioned, they've been very, very good on fourth down, and that all comes down to execution. It really does. If you execute well, you're going to make plays and do some things. So I don't see them as a team that's going to give Notre Dame a defense a lot of problems. And again, I think because they played Navy, that's one of the main reasons why. I do think their personnel is a little bit better, and again, their execution's a little bit better. But I think Notre Dame haven't seen that in a few weeks ago, knowing kind of the pace of what they're going to play and the speed of what it looks like. And Notre Dame being a pretty good tackling team, I think that's going to help them as well. I mean, to be honest with you, I'll be surprised if Notre Dame doesn't win by 20, 21 points. That I really will be. Your thoughts there?
I mean, I could see them not winning by that because of the limited possessions. Maybe that's the case, but I do think like
the only reason that Notre Dame beat Navy by so much was because they turned the ball over. Normally those drives would take another 4 or 5 plays before they'd fizzle out or whatever. But because they turned it over so many times, Notre Dame got more possessions than they normally would. And that really made it, a blowout. That's going to be harder for Notre Dame to do in this game if Army doesn't turn it over. And we can say Army doesn't turn it over because they don't, but neither did Navy before they played Notre Dame.
Yeah.
And then they had all kinds of problems. Now, again, I think that the thumb injury on the quarterback in that Navy game, he just shouldn't have played.
Had a huge impact.
That had a huge impact on the game, and he just shouldn't have played. But I think they also realized they didn't have much of a chance to win if he didn't play, so you may as well give it a shot. But so we'll see. Let's bring Greg on here real quick, and Greg, I just want to get your thoughts on this game. I know you've given a lot of thoughts on hit and hustle, but now you've had a time to kind of, think about things. What are your thoughts here?
On the Army game specifically is what you're talking about. Well, I did my thoughts. There's a question from Tyler Borgman I wanted to get to, Jamie and Mike, and I'll answer it as well. Do you want the ball first in this game? We talked about this a little bit against Navy, where there is, because of the nature of the way these teams play, you might want to get the ball, like you said. If you start with the ball, stop or score, stop, score, you're up 14. And like you guys said, that's a huge difference in the way that Army's going to have to play Notre Dame. They could be down 2 scores with only 1 possession. I think that something that's come up in the last couple of days mitigates that for me. Jamie against Navy was very heavily, like, always defer. And here's the thing. Notre Dame in the middle 8 this year is 90. The score is 96-0. Notre Dame has 96 points. The opponent has 0 points. Notre Dame is such a good middle eight team. It's like you always want to get that second possession or that first possession
In the
of the second half.
Yeah.
Because then like you're either building a lead or you're kind of shortening a lead. And I just think because Notre Dame is so good in that situation specifically, it's such an advantage for them this year. I think you're always deferring. You're always taking the ball second if you have the opportunity to do so. Obviously, this last game worked out really well because Virginia fumbled the opening kickoff. Notre Dame essentially got to open the game with the ball and the second half with the ball. So that really worked out. I just kind of agree with everything you guys are saying. Like you have to, if you get up 2 scores on them, you're going to be fine. I think the fact that Bryson Daly is beat up coming into this, the way that they're running him, it's just like it was going to happen no matter what. Just such a key part to their offense. And now he's hurt, and now he has to play the best defense he's going to play probably in his entire life. So like it's just not a good situation for him personally, and I don't see how they can maintain their drives the way that they have been against other teams. I just don't see how they can do it.
It's just their competition is so bad that I think a lot of people look at the numbers and they get worried about it. It's just, I mean, could you imagine Notre Dame's numbers if they played those teams? Even Notre Dame with Notre Dame's offense, they would put up some massive numbers if they face some of those teams. And so you have to kind of really put that into consideration when you're looking at this and going from there. One other thing I wanted to get to before we get to questions, Justin Thurman being out of the class, decommitted today to Kansas. That's not a surprise to any of the three of us. I think it was the best situation that Notre Dame could hope for. Not that I don't like Justin Thurman. I think he's a pretty good player. But when you have Aeneas Williams and you have Kedron Young in front of you, you could take 100 backs and it's not going to matter because they're not going to play in front of these guys. So what you need to do is find a back, just one, that really wants to be at Notre Dame and can bring something a little bit different to the table, which is what I think that Nolan James brings is, he's different than Aeneas. He's different than Kedron. And so you add something that's different, but more importantly, now you've opened up something that you've really given yourself an opportunity to go sell to a 2026 back. Look, we only took one back last year. We have some real opportunity here. And by the way, look at how we've developed Jeremiah Love. Look at how we've developed JD Price. We're playing a freshman in third down. So don't say that, we won't play a freshman, and let's be honest, playing third down is the hardest part of playing running back, in my opinion. Blitz pickup is such a difficult thing. And then catching the football and that type of thing, it's a difficult position, to be in. So I just think it really adds Yama the opportunity for a 2025 guy and just says, look, Nolan James is a good player. There's no doubt about it. And we expect him to be pretty good, but there's an opportunity here for an elite back to come in. And I think that is why we're seeing this more than anything. Your thoughts here?
Yeah. And I think that Thurman, when I look at him as a player, and I certainly think he looks better as a senior than he did as a junior. Like he's improved, but to me, he is like a very much a straight line speed guy, who can do some things, but he's not in the style of back that I'm looking at where I'm thinking, when I look at all of the backs on Notre Dame's roster, they're all like good, run hard, good after through contact, make people miss in the hole, great feet. And I just kind of didn't really think he fit there. No. And so
he's a guy who needs a lane.
Yes.
He needs a big lane. Yeah.
And so I just kind of think that it was going to be tough for him to really kind of like find himself. Like obviously it's not like he couldn't get better. And obviously there's been improvement from other guys similar to him in other ways. I just think like you said, it was going to be tough there. And yeah, they can, I mean, we'll see if they add another back in addition to
They won't.
James.
I won't. I don't think they will.
Probably not. Probably
Yeah.
not. I'm sure they will, take a run at somebody or are taking a run at somebody. But like the thing is that even if they just get James, I do think it like kind of sets up more for like that 2026, to really like get somebody there too. And I also think when you're looking at backs specifically, there's so much there where you're looking at guys when they're getting offered as sophomores who've like barely touched the ball.
Yeah.
Like some of these guys are like the third string guy on their team. And I know you see them at camp and you see all that too, but you don't see them with the game reps that they're getting later on when they're like a junior and senior. And
Well,
when
it's
you get
different.
that,
Camp is athletes, right?
yeah,
That's not running back. You know what I mean?
yeah. And you get that further evaluation of guys.
Sure.
And I think Audric Estime is like a perfect example of that, right? Who looked way different as a senior, and look how that turned out, right? So, I think it just kind of made sense.
Yeah. All right, let's get to some questions here, and we got a lot of these coming up. Greg, we want to get your opinion on some of this as well. And the first question is, can't wait to watch any KK Smith. Any chance KK Smith can get some reps over Mitchell? The field spot has been pretty much invisible in the offense. And then there's a lot of questions about Deion Colsey, and there's a couple other questions about people talking about what should the rotation be at this point. And Bo Collins has been not as consistent as he was. And should they look at maybe looking at some other options at this point? I don't think that KK Smith, I shouldn't say that. I don't think Chris Mitchell has been a problem necessarily. I just don't think that they've been able to throw the ball deep, which is what he's good at. That's just been something that has been a situation. Faison has, they'd love to get Faison more involved, but when you drop the football, how long can you continue to do that? And so I don't know. It's interesting because I've seen people say, well, the wide receivers are kind of a disappointment, blah, blah, blah. But then you watch the actual athletic talent of this group playing against the competition. And let's be honest, they haven't played a lot of great defenses at this point. And I don't see a lot of NFL players here at this point. So, I wouldn't say there've been a disappointment, but I wonder at some point, do you look at some options here? We have seen Deion Colsey play more, and he's done a good job in the blocking. We've watched that for sure. Made a big play in this game. What are your thoughts here? Let's start with you, Greg. What would you do at the wide receiver situation?
Well, I think the part of the problem with like Chris Mitchell specifically is like he hasn't been a one-on-one beater guy where it's like he's not winning one-on-one matchups. If they get him in a zone, right? If he's in zone or he can find space there, he's caught the ball pretty well this year. So that hasn't been the thing. That hasn't been the problem the way it has been for Faison. But Faison is the guy who's won one-on-one matchups. So it's like they want him out there because of that skill set specifically. And Chris Mitchell hasn't been able to do that. He hasn't been able to get behind the defense for whatever reason. The problem with Bo Collins, and I went back and looked, in the last 2 games, they're 2 of 7 targeting him, right? He didn't get credited with the drop in this game because of the play where he did drop the ball. It was a penalty, so that play got wiped out. But the play did happen, right? We all watched it. I didn't think there was great effort on the RPO on the first possession where the play got called back for penalty for roughing the passer. I didn't think that was great effort. I didn't think on the next possession there was a great effort there. There's just a body language problem for me with Bo Collins where I think before that game he wasn't producing a ton, but they also weren't giving him a ton of opportunities. In the last couple of games, again, 2 for 7, that's not going to work, right? And so that's when people start to ask questions about like Deion Colsey, like, can he get out there? The thing with Colsey is like there are things with Colsey clearly to me, just based on how they've used him in the last couple of years. There's a disconnect between what they want to see from him in practice and what's coming out in the games. my question is like, when do you activate Jaden Thomas a little bit more, right? I think the fact that Greathouse is emerging is like a huge sign for them. I still think they count on Jordan Faison. I think they like him, so like they're going to continue to put him out there. They got to get more from Collins, and then the fact that they're starting to activate Mitchell Evans a little bit more. I don't think KK Smith. I just don't think that they think he's ready. That's everything they're showing us. They don't think he's ready to go, and so to me, it's just like it's not someone that I really think about too much because like if they liked him, they'd put him out there. They like him more than the other guys. They would put him out there, and they just haven't yet. So that's kind of
they haven't got a lot of production from any of them, so that they'd be willing to try anything at this point, I would think. And the Bull Collins thing is interesting. What's interesting, and you mentioned Jaden Thomas, is that for whatever reason, he just has not materialized and has not been the same since that hamstring pull. He just hasn't. Yeah. And it's weird that usually that's an injury that you can overcome, but for whatever reason, he hasn't been able to overcome that. But at some point, I think with Colsey, probably the biggest problem we've seen in practice, Jamie, is that, he should be a 50-50 ball guy, and he just doesn't win enough of those in practice. And I think that's what keeps him off the field as much as anything. Your thought there?
Yeah, I mean, I would also the one thing I'll say about Collins, and I said this, in the post-game show too, that he doesn't look like engaged, and I think as we're rewatching it, I don't think that's fair to say in terms of like, because you watch a guy block, he blocks his butt off. He really, really, and that's another thing with Chris Mitchell too. Chris Mitchell, like, he wasn't known as a blocker at FIU. He's blocking hard. All of the receivers are blocking hard. So that's why it's like hard to take some of these guys out too, because they're doing all this other stuff. And obviously the run game is such a big part of it, of Notre Dame's offense, and explosive runs are huge. And go watch every single explosive run from Notre Dame this year, and you'll find like key blocks from receivers that are doing it. And I mean, like across the board, you can find Faison, Mitchell, Collins, Thomas, Greathouse, all of these guys making blocks down the field. Harrison, right? Like all of these guys blocking down the field. I don't think they play. I think they play the right amount of guys. I don't think they're like overplaying too many guys or whatever. There just hasn't been enough guys that have kind of like stood out with it enough. I think Jaden Greathouse has played actually like really well in the last
last couple games for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think he's played really well and has kind of emerged as like
kind of the guy,
especially with especially and probably he would have got obviously a lot more run in this game if he didn't get hurt, right? I think that they really need Faison to obviously catch the ball and be more consistent with it, because he does offer more after the catch. And Collins, to me, it's like there's something holding him back there where it's just a confidence thing or something. But he's had problems with drops his whole career. Like that was a thing for him at Clemson. And that's been that too. But he will still make a play like after the catch or do something. Like I would still throw a deep ball to him. Like he can win on a deep ball, right? So, but there has to be something there. Like if I'm looking at I want to throw to the boundary and win on a slant, I'd much rather have Jaden Thomas.
I think that's it. I think Notre Dame has looked at Collins, especially because of the beginning of the season, he was kind of the guy that was starting to emerge, that he was kind of here's my go-to guy on third down. But when you drop the ball, you can't be the guy on third down. You just can't be.
No, you can't.
And same situation with Faison at this point. To me, it makes sense to me, especially if Greathouse is good to go. I'd love to see Greathouse and Jaden Harrison. I think he's earned some opportunities.
Yeah,
he should get in the game, and maybe you start to look at moving Thomas Muller to a boundary. I don't know whether he can be that effective there, but I just don't think that so far, based off of what I've seen, I don't think he should be eating any slot reps. I just don't. I think you got two guys who can win there as long as they're healthy, meaning Greathouse, to put him in that situation. And then, of course, you're looking at the field situation. You got to hope that Faison emerges. He's got to emerge in order. Something's got to start happening with him in order to continue to throw him the ball. And they need him for the playoff. They're just they don't need him for USC. They need this guy to really put it together. He's going to have to activate and get better. And I like seeing them getting Mitchell Thomas in the game. That was such a missing part of their offense.
Mitchell Evans, yeah.
Or Mitchell Thomas. Mitchell Evans, yes. Yeah. It's just really, really
Mike's been at this too long.
I know. I got all these linebackers in my head. So, but yeah. We'll see. But it's something that to keep an eye on. And the only reason that you're having these questions is because you're not getting the kind of production that you hope to. So, yeah. All right.
I think one last thing on this.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I think people talk about like what's holding Notre Dame back, or Notre Dame's efficacy on offense, just period. Jamie and I talked about it last week. It's an explosivity thing, explosiveness. The problem is that Bo Collins and Jordan Faison, they're their two big, like, explosive guys, right? They're the dynamic guys that Notre Dame wants to stretch the field with. We did see a little bit more of Jaden Harrison, so there is a little bit there where it's like that could be mitigated by him. But Notre Dame has 20 drops this year. Collins and Faison have 9 of them combined, and Faison is dropping. I'd say it's 25% drop rate. 1 out of every 4 passes that are thrown to him, he's putting on the ground. It's a problem for
Big
them.
Problem.
For their ceiling and things like that.
Well, and it hurts your quarterback too, and it hurts his confidence, and it hurts his confidence in that it's not just, I'm not making a play. It's like, do I throw to this guy? We need to extend this drive. I can't throw this ball to him on 3rd down if he's going to drop it. And to me, I think that's hurt. And then, when you got offensive line issues, as we've seen in this last game, all these tiny little things add up to what we saw on Saturday, which is a lot of inefficiency. And even though you made it a lot of plays and did a lot of good things, it only takes one screw up, as we've seen literally on those first 4 drives, one screw up to kill everything. And that's what happened on those first 4 drives. You look at all 4 of those drives, and there was something catastrophic that happened that shut the whole thing down. And you can't do that, especially on 4 straight drives. And so I'll tell you this, if I were Mike Denbrock, there would have been some choice words for my offense today. I think they meet today. There'll be some choice words for my offense today, because, game 10 just shouldn't happen. You just shouldn't have that many catastrophic things happen. And I'm sure he was very, very upset about the whole situation, and rightfully so. You got to play better than that. You got to have, more consistency and more focus after that. So, all right. Let's see. After several games, we hear the head coach say need to go back and clean up some of the mistakes we're making. 10 games in, where has the staff done a good job of that? Well, until this game, I would say dumb penalties and turnovers. I think that they've really done a great job with that. And also, I think run fits with on defense. I think they've done a much better job of not being out of place and being slow. I think that's been a big thing with the defense. Anything you else want to add there, Jamie?
I think the run fit thing has been huge, actually. Like, that has been something that, when you've seen the run defense just in general, is way better. Like, if you look at even like Virginia in this game, a lot of the stuff they got were on like long down a distance where they're just like trying to run, like, just because they couldn't even pass. Like, bad stuff was happening when they were passing, right? Like, they weren't running it like down Notre Dame's throat at all. And I think you think like early down stuff where Notre Dame, like, the run fits are just like so much better.
Yeah. All right. Next question. Looking at the most likely range of results, it's hard to see Notre Dame jumping above Penn State for the coveted number 5 spot, right? But number 6 would still be a big deal based on the semi-draw. Yeah, totally. First of all, go boat rowers. We got to hope for Minnesota. And look, they could do that. We saw what Ohio State did to Penn State at the end of the game, and they ran the football, and that's why they won that game. They weren't doing much when it came to the passing game, and all of a sudden, Ohio State started running the football better. And as soon as they did, they were able to put that game away. Well, guess what Minnesota does well? They run the football. Now, are they as good as Ohio State? I guess we're going to see. But I like that the game's on the road. It's going to be a big game for them, meaning Minnesota. They've had a pretty nice season going so far. So it's certainly doable. But, number 5 seed versus number 6, first of all, you got to take care of business. That's the most important thing. But, is it better to face a Big 12 champion versus a ACC champion? I think it just depends on who is the Big 12 champion.
Yeah.
And then who is the ACC
champion. Might also be Boise State.
Sure.
The 4th seed now. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll have to see what happens when it's all said and done. But I'll tell you that I think it really depends on who the team is as to who you want to play and go from there, because Notre Dame is going to match up well with some teams. They may not with others. But I think that they can overcome some of these matchups for sure. Okay, I'm not going to be able to get to all these questions. I apologize, but I'll try and get to as many of them as I can. I think this one is important. Our kicking game has taken 2 steps backward with Mitch Jeter's injury. At this point, we can't consider anything automatic. When do you think Mitch will fully recover? And I mean, I know it sounds crazy. I know you don't. You hope it doesn't matter. I wouldn't kick him in this game. I just wouldn't. You hope it doesn't matter. This kid, he needs a rest, and I realize you're slowly trying to bring him into it, but anything could happen. My understanding was he was only kicking from very short distances. That's what he was okay for. And I realize you want to kind of get him back into the flow of things so he doesn't have to come in and make a big time kick, against USC or in the playoff without having kicked for a long time. So I get that idea and things like that, but it doesn't take long to re-injure something in your leg. And when you're a kicker, that's a bad thing, Jamie. So if I'm Notre Dame, I wouldn't kick him unless I needed to in this game. I really wouldn't. Your thoughts there?
Yeah, and I would be like ultra aggressive when it came to 4th and short and those kind of things, or if you're in that area of the field too, right? Like, I think that's the way. And Notre Dame's been great on 4th down and converting those 4th and shorts too this year. So that's the way I would look at it. But I mean, I don't think there's any other way to look at it other than concerning. Like, when you can't use your kicker, past a certain distance, and then obviously they can't count on the other guy. So it's just, I mean, it's not a good situation right now. You hope it doesn't cost them in one of these games, but you don't know, because Notre Dame hasn't played a tight game in so long, right? Where it's mattered, and you just don't know if this Army game with it is a pretty good Army team, and there are going to be a lot of possessions. You don't know if those points are going to matter at some point, or against USC, who knows what it's going to be like, right?
Yeah.
So I think, if you can avoid not kicking him at all in the game, great. But at the same time, if you don't feel good about another guy making a 30-yard kick and you need it, then you kind of have to use him, right? So it's obviously not. That's a bad situation. It's not a good situation at all.
I just want to put my hand up. This is alarming. The whole thing, listening to him today, it was so red flaggy. The way 42 yards is his limit at 42 yards. Think about this, okay? If you're at the 30-yard line, you cannot kick a field goal. You cannot trust Yoakum to do it. The other kicker, it's that was just not reassuring at all.
No.
So you can't kick a 47-yard field goal. The field goal they kicked against Texas A&M to make it 23-13, that's off the table. The other part that I'm thinking is, if you're talking about a 42-yard limit and he's got this groin issue, how often is he kicking in practice at all? When was the last time he had a real practice week where it's I'm kicking the ball as normal? You have a kicker who's not kicking the ball. Look, I'm not a kicker, right? And maybe it's riding a bike and all those other things. I think from a leg strength standpoint, from a rhythm standpoint, you want to be kicking the ball a lot. It's like a golfer to me.
Yeah, no,
It's like
yeah.
if you're a golfer and you're not practicing hitting because of one thing, and then it's like, oh, I have to limit how much practice I have, and then I have to save myself for a tournament when I even can't rip it. Like, this is a problem. To Jamie's point, if they are in a situation where they need to like be in a close game and these points really matter, then it's not good. And I don't think he's going to be ready for Army. I think the only time that we have a chance to be ready is a potential playoff matchup. I'd be very concerned about going out to USC, just based on what Marcus Freeman said today and listening to his comments.
It's it's a consistency thing. I have one of my really good friends played golf on the Nike Tour for many years, and very, very good player. And he quit. He got so sick of golf, he didn't golf for 6 years. And he goes out, and the first time he goes out on the course, he shoots 1 under par. And you're like, well, this is just, the guy's just a natural. And he is. But then the next 2 times he went out, he shot terrible. And it was because he just wasn't in practice. And it's the practice part of things that keep you consistent. It's not your talent, it's the practice part of things. So it is a little bit of a concern. There's no question about it. And I mean, maybe when you can extend your your roster limit, as far as when we're expecting the roster limit to be moved up another 20 slots, maybe you look at another scholarship kicker at that point, so you can help yourself, or maybe somebody can do both, kick and punt. I don't know, but you can't get, especially if you're going to be playing in the playoff and you're trying to win a national championship, you can't put yourself in this situation. And it's just, I don't know. If anybody knows Mr. Miyagi, we got to get him on the horn here. We got to fix this problem somehow. Somehow it's got to happen. So, all right. A guy wants to know about Kobe Onyeluke. The guy who's got 16 snaps on defensive end. Again, he's the only reason that, and no disrespect to him, it's just they don't have anybody else. I wouldn't expect a lot out of him. And again, I don't mean any disrespect to him. It's just they don't have anybody else to put in the game because Logan Thomas is hurt. So they're just really thin right now.
Yeah, they're playing at the end. It's garbage time.
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly what it is. All right. I just wanted to answer that because Ocean City asked it last week and we ran out of time. So I wanted to answer it for him this week. All right. Why can't they just use freshmen to run fly routes? We need more athleticism on the field. I mean, we get this question all the time, and you can't just put a guy out there and say, okay, let's just let him run one route, and that's what he does. Because if that's all he ever does, everybody knows why he's in the game, and you're just tipping your hand as far as, why this guy's in the game. And sure, you can maybe bait some things and do some things like that, but let's be honest, we're in a situation where you can't have wasted downs with this offense. When there's so many things that can break down, that's what happens. And I saw a question just a minute ago about how do you improve third down? Well, don't get in 3rd and 26 or 3rd and 18. That's how you improve third down. And the same question again. There was another question about why did Jadarian Price not have as many carries? Well, again, if you're in 2nd and 26. As they were many times in this game, the running backs aren't going to get a lot of runs because you're trying to eat up field that you didn't have. So you're going to have to throw the ball a little bit more. So, there's a lot of reasons for this, but really the problems with offense is you can't get behind the sticks. And as soon as you do, you don't have the athletes, you don't have the pass protection. You just don't have the quarterback at this point to where you can consistently, make these types of plays. And that's really what's been hurting the offense more than anything. All right. Let's see. We've heard a lot about Freeman harping on the NYU debacle every week and to motivate the team. How long do you think that can last before it rings hollow? My personal opinion is the message shifts to USC beatdown from 2 years ago before the team leaves New York a week from now. Thoughts there, Yama?
seems to be working pretty good on this 8-game winning streak. So, I mean, I think it's one of those things. Like, obviously, when you get down to the final game of the regular season, I don't think you don't need to say, "Hey, remember NIU when you're playing USC."
USC. You
There
shouldn't.
is like, yeah, and even in this game too, they're not. I mean, they'll maybe do a little bit of reminders, but it's like when you're playing a lot of these other teams that they've playing, where like, look at Stanford, not a good record, but obviously, if you take them lightly, look at they just beat Louisville,
Yeah.
right? Like, they also beat Syracuse, right? Like, that's what can happen with some of these other teams, right? Like, you Florida State, you have to approach it like that, right? Because obviously, the team showed that when they didn't approach it that right way, you had to. So, I mean, I don't think they're being like, showing up at like, beginning of every team unit. By the way, guys, remember Northern Illinois. Like, I don't think that's happening, to make it like that. But you don't have to talk about the importance of these games. They like, you can say like, this team is undefeated. They're taking it seriously. They're taking it very seriously. The pressure is so big right now because of like, these games mean so much. And they're not going to need to do any of that stuff. They don't even need to go back. I mean, if he wants to, he can show that 2022 team, but that's not like what, they don't need. Do they need that as motivation? The motivation should be like, prepare for this team, because like Zachariah Branch can do this, Deuce Robinson can do this. They have a bunch of playmakers that can win games. All they have to do is show like a bunch of film of this year where USC is this close to being like 9-1 or whatever they are, right? Like, so I don't think they're gonna have to do much of the NIU like reminders anymore, because they're gone through most of that part of the schedule, where they aren't not really playing those teams anymore.
Yeah. All right. This is a very good question here. Which team are you most concerned about playing in the playoff in a matchup standpoint? Kind of depends. Is Carson Beck going to play well? Because if Carson Beck's going to play well, I'm scared of Georgia, but he may not. With Ohio State, they can be very inconsistent sometimes on offense, but if they put it all together, they're scary. But I'll tell you the team that kind of scares me the most, and it's just because for the same reason that teams would be scared to play against Notre Dame's defense, and that's Oregon. Oregon seems to be the team that plays the most consistent and does not beat themselves. So because they're that means that you have to play very, very consistent to beat them. And that's why nobody's been able to do it so far. You have to be consistent on offense, consistent on defense, special teams, not turn the ball over, not create a bunch of stupid penalties. Because if you do any of those, if you do some of them and don't do some of them, you don't have a chance to beat that team. So you're going to have to play really, really well to beat Oregon. A team like Georgia, you may not have to play that well because they may not play that well either. Texas, same way. Bama, same way. I'm not afraid of Penn State at all just because I don't think they're very good. Me personally, I don't think Indiana's as good as people think. I think that's going to be shown, although Matt and I keep arguing about that against Ohio State. I think that's going to be shown. I just don't think Indiana is that good. And maybe I'm wrong. I wouldn't be afraid to play Miami. Ole Miss would be a concern a little bit because I think their defense is a lot better than I thought they were. But we'll see. Tennessee's defense is a bit concerning, and I think that Nico's starting to play a little bit better. But I think Notre Dame can hang with any of these. I say the game that would be, like I said, would be the most tough matchup would be Oregon in that, I don't think that they're necessarily a better team than anybody. I really don't. I just think they're the most consistent, and you better show up ready to play because if you're not on your A game, you're going to lose. Thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I would agree with Oregon. I mean, I'll say Ohio State. I know they're not always the most consistent, but they have the scariest playmakers just all around. Like, out of the guys that are just the top talent guys that could take over a game, that's tough to match. It really is. So that makes, them a scary opponent. And like, that is a game where you're like, man, you wish you had the Patellos and the Bubakars and the
Yes.
Morrisons, because then you're like, well, now we think we can match with them a little bit better, right? Like, and it's just that much tougher when you don't have that, right? So, and like you said, Georgia on there, if they're in the A game, Carson Beck's playing well. Ole Miss, I think, is a scary opponent because I think their offense is hard to defend. Like, they will score points. They will score points. And their defense, I think, is really, really good. And like they're scarier to me than Tennessee, because I think Tennessee, like, I could see Nico having just like a miserable game against Notre Dame, like Al Golden just getting him,
no, I
putting him in
agree.
a straight jacket.
You're going to have a harder time against Jackson Dart for sure.
Yeah.
He's just more experienced, and or Nico, I think you can confuse him a little bit, and I think Georgia did that in that game.
Yeah, and I will say that I think Alabama, like, the scariest individual player to me is Jalen Milroe.
Yeah,
because he's that guy that could just, like, all of a sudden, like, he could be having a terrible game throwing the ball and just break off like a 70-yard run or something like that. Like, he just has that physical ability that I don't really think any of the other quarterbacks have.
Yeah, he certainly has the most upside out of all of them, as far as being a complete and total game wrecker. And, it would be tough to defend him. And the thing about Ohio State is, I keep looking at, Howard can run. He's not somebody that's a statue back there. He can move. He can make some plays with his feet. And you're going to have to be able to completely condense that pocket to affect him and make him make some bad plays. And they just got too many good receivers there. I know Notre Dame's secondary is very good. There's no question about that. I just would worry about Notre Dame not being able to get to Howard enough to affect him, to make enough plays to slow down that offense. So that would be my concern with Ohio State.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add there?
No, I totally agree. Like, I just think that, and the other thing is that I would say Ohio State, you can kind of like the game last year where Notre Dame's defense did a great job, like the whole game, really, right? And all of a sudden, one bad play, Trevion Henderson 60 yards to the grip. Like, that's just what it can be. And they have Judkins and Henderson, like, they just have that, and that's just it's just really hard to play like a perfect game against that kind of talent.
Yeah. Well, and you just got, and we've talked about this many times on the show. Usually it's one guy that makes a big play that makes a difference in the game, and that's what it is. And do you have a guy, Notre Dame has a Jeremiah Love who can do that, but how many more guys?
Price can do that too.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. And he can, and I suppose Faison can too if he catches the ball, but you got to catch the ball and you got to have all these things happen. It's interesting, as a fan and as a analyst following one team, you tend to, your weaknesses on your team way better than the weaknesses on the opponent. And I think the opponent is the same way, where they know, like Ohio State guy would know more about why Ohio State struggles to beat a team like Northwestern for a half or something like that.
Yeah.
When you're like, what is the deal? You got all these players. I know Northwestern has an okay defense and everything, but you guys should just be tattooing them. But again, they got two bigger fish to fry coming up, and that all impacts this. And you can't be on for every single game. And, that's what you're seeing all across college football. We got one more question here, which is what has happened to Kedron Young. And I mean, folks, if you play Kedron Young, you're taking away plays from J.D. Price. And if you're taking away plays from J.D. Price, you're worried about him leaving. So Kedron Young, they're going to redshirt. And by all accounts, and I mean all accounts, they think he's going to be a stud, a star. But you can only play him in so many games. This was not a game because of the way the thing kind of unfolded. There was just not an opportunity for a lot of running back runs. There just weren't, because, again, you were behind the sticks all the time. So, maybe we'll see some Kedron Young in this game coming up, maybe not. But you don't want to put somebody in there at this point because you want to make sure that you take care of the people that have earned the right to play, that have been playing, and you don't want to burn somebody's red shirt either at this point. So Kedron Young's time's coming, and he's going to be a star by everything I've heard. Definitely going to be a star. It's just you got to take care of the people that are out there right now. And people say, well, JD Price should be playing third down, and it's like, well, he hasn't earned it, and again, I don't no disrespect to him. They just trust what Aeneas Williams can do in third down. And if you watch, I mean, Jimmy I'm not going to say that he's Kyron back there as far as blitz pickup, but my God, for a true freshman, my God, for a true freshman, unbelievable how well he has done. So, these are just kind of one of those things that when you got guys who perform well and do something, you put them in those roles. And why change as long as they're doing the job that they're supposed to be doing? And so that's what it boils down to. All right, folks, that's going to be it for the show. I hope you enjoyed that. Once again, if you're not a member of Irish Sports Daily, go to the front page, click on the premium section. You can sign up. There's going to be a whole lot of stuff to talk about here in the next few weeks with, of course, the games coming up, playoffs, rankings, recruiting. We got signing day coming up. There's still guys left out there that'll be hopefully committing. So lots going on there. Also, make sure you check us out on YouTube. We're going to be, after each Marcus Freeman press conference, Yama and I will be here every Monday doing the show live. If you have questions or want to comments or whatever, we'll get to those as well in the chat room. And then also make sure you check out what Greg and the Yama do on Hit and Hustle as well. Thanks to Greg. Greg, great job with the production today. So thank you for doing that and also coming in and offering your thoughts. Before we go, I did want to get Greg's thoughts. If you're still there, Greg, which team are you most afraid of?
Oh, who am I afraid of? I think Jamie Bama with Milroe, the way that he runs the ball, that it just kind of freaks me out. Notre Dame hasn't faced anyone like him. And he's just kind of a wild card where it's like, Caleb Williams gave Notre Dame problems in 2022 with his running and the way he was able to do that. Obviously there was, different defense, and that's the first year of Al Golden, but it's just such a wild card that you have to deal with. Riley Leonard, look what Riley Leonard was able to do against Notre Dame with obviously much worse talent last year with Duke. And he was able to vault Duke to the lead, but basically just running and using his legs and that sort of thing. Bama scares me. Ole Miss scares me the most on that. Not simply because of Dart and the way that they do that, but their D-line is just kind of insane. That concerns me. I should say, like, every team kind of concerns me, right? In the playoffs, Notre Dame could lose to any of them. We use terms like I think Penn State's wildly overrated, and the fact that they're 4 is a disgrace, and the committee should apologize. Totally. But like, they're still a good team, and if Notre Dame were to play them, I wouldn't be like, oh yeah, Notre Dame by 3 touchdowns. Like, no, that wouldn't. I think all these teams are good, and should Notre Dame get to the playoffs, any win would be a good win at that point. So. I
think if Notre Dame plays well, they'd beat Penn State by 10 points, but they got to play well. I just think that that's the difference between the two teams. Everybody else, I could see Notre Dame losing by 15, 20. I could see Notre Dame beating them by 15 or 20. It just depends on how well Notre Dame plays and how well the other team plays. And that's really what I could see it happening anyway on any of those teams. If Notre Dame plays really well, they have a chance to beat all those teams, and hopefully we'll get a chance to see that happen. And but first you got to take care of Miami, got to take care of USC. USC game's concerning. We got to hope that UCLA puts something up on them. They always seem to have some sort of surprise for them, and I'm really excited to watch the UCLA game and see how their quarterback reacts, and now that they've had a little bit of success. Again, I'm worried about the USC back. That guy's a good player, and when they can run the football, we just got to hope Lincoln Riley doesn't stick with it, doesn't have the patience to stick with it. But when they can run the football, they're a tough team to defend. There's no question. All right, folks, that's going to be it. We will talk to you next week on Power Hour. Thanks for listening, and hopefully you enjoy the YouTube live show as well. If you want to check it out live there, you can go see that as well. And Greg did a great job with a bunch of graphics, all that good stuff. So thanks for listening, folks, and watching, and we'll talk to you next week on Power Hour.